shot with an achete. I see you, such getting it, why condemn.
Yo, good evening and welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Our Facebook feed, our Facebook Live. I hope you can hear us loud and clear. Please do let us know where you are watching from. If you can hear us, do let us know. We'd love to hear where you're watching us from and how's where you are currently at. And please also do us one more favor. Do share this broadcast with everybody on your timeline. Tag your husband, tag your wife, tag your spouse, and just
your
get
friends,
them,
your
tag your
neighbors,
friends,
everyone.
everybody. Just tell them, hey, listen, Mr. and Mrs. has just started, and please come through and have a look at what they're talking about tonight. So please do send us in the WhatsApps, in the comment section. Tell us where you're watching us from.
Yeah, so we're here, we're back, and tonight, what are we talking about?
Tonight, so the interesting thing about tonight's conversation is that we last week, about maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we were watching one of our favorite sitcoms, Blackish, right? So on Blackish, the last couple of weeks they have been very marriage centered, and it's been a very interesting last couple of weeks on that show. So they played a scene on that show on Blackish, and it was such a tear-jerking scene.
Yeah, it was sad.
It was a sad scene about a marriage. And so when they say the statement in that scene, that just rang a bell in my head, and like, you know what, babe, why don't we talk about that on our next Facebook Live? So yeah, so that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about
how did we get here?
How did we get here? How did we get here? But before that, I want to just give a couple of shout outs. Bronwyn, hey, Bronwyn. Welcome, Molly, all the way from England. Welcome.
Hey, Precious. Hello, Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah.
Yes, great watching from Acadia.
All the way
Good to
from
have
Acadia.
you.
Absolutely. So, thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And so, like we said tonight, we're talking about how did we get here? You know, marriage, you find yourself in situations sometimes, and you're like, okay, so where did we go wrong? Or how did we get here? But it's incremental. You never actually really get to know at what stage you got to where you're at.
Because things happen, day to day, you're facing different challenges, you are dealing with different issues in your marriage, and sometimes we sweep them under the carpet. Sometimes we just think, you know what, never mind, and we leave it at that. But we don't realize that we're actually making a build-up of the ultimate marriage. And so things happen day to day, and then before you know it, 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, 15 years down the line, you're sitting there and you're wondering what happened to your marriage. And that's where you get to a point where you ask yourselves, how did we get here?
How did we get here? So hopefully we want to show you the clip that we watched on Blackish. Hopefully it's going to work out for us tonight. So just hold on there. We want to show you this clip. So this is the clip that inspired tonight's program, right? The clip that inspired tonight's program. So take a look at the following clip. Well, unfortunately, it's refusing to play. So we're gonna try it out again a little later. Hopefully this time around it will play. But we really wanted you to watch this clip. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, we'll definitely try and pull it back up again so that you can have a look at the clip at what really inspired this show.
So at the beginning, at the beginning of your marriage, I'm sure most of us can agree and say when you start off your marriage, maybe it's the day after the wedding, it's the day after the lobola, so day after, you said I do.
Mm-hmm.
You're beginning your journey as a husband and wife. Usually most of us, look at each other and think, how did we get here? And we ask that with such excitement because we're thinking, just yesterday or just a couple of months ago, we were just dating, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. And at that moment, you are dreaming, you're fantasizing, you're imagining what it would be like to be Mr. and Mrs.
Yeah.
And now the day has come, you're Mr. and Mrs. and you sit there and with such satisfaction, you ask each other, how did we get here? Are we really married? Did we do this? And then you're excited. But as the journey goes, marriage is a journey. It's a process. It's not a one-day event. It's a journey. And so as the journey goes, you can end up at two different destinations. And as a couple, it's up to the two of you to decide where you're going to end up, what the destination is going to be. It can be, the destination can be, wow, how did we get here? Or the destination can be, with such a sad face, with hurt, with pain, how did we get here? But at the end of the day, the ball is in your court as husband and wife, as a couple, as the two of you, for you to determine the direction and the goal and the destination of your marriage. It's between the two of you to determine where you're going to end up.
Absolutely. And so you can ask yourselves this question, how did we get here? In the negative, you can ask yourselves this question in the positive. And so when I start off with the positive, it's important for you to get to a point, even at the highlights of your marriage, where you ask yourselves, how did we get here? How did we get here? Because where we are now is a good place. And so the reason why we're asking is so that we can retrace our steps and replicate when necessary, so that we can copy the good things that we did. And so when we then copy the good things that we did, it makes it easier for us to continue doing these good things over and over and over and over again. So it's important that in the good times, you ask yourselves, how did we get here?
Yeah, so that you're ticking off. You're saying, okay, for us to be able to redo this or to get the same feeling or to get the same satisfaction, these are the steps we took. Maybe we communicated very well. Maybe we worked very well together. Maybe our teamwork was on point, and this is how we got to this place. Or whatever it is that took you to that level where you are in satisfaction. You sit down and it's like that a debrief meeting, where you're sitting down, you're like, guys, how did we achieve this? This is what you're doing as husband and wife. You're like, okay, babe, how did we get this? And it's like, okay, tick off the box. It was communication. Tick off the box. We did this right. And it helps you so that as you continue to go on in the journey of your marriage, when you continue to tag on those things that got you that satisfaction and got you that place where you say, wow, how did we get here?
Absolutely. So we're going to try that clip one more time. So please cross your fingers. We're going to try that clip one more time because I desperately want you to see what inspired this program tonight.
I'm the oldest. I get the biggest room. No fair, Zoe.
Oh, babe, I can't believe all of this is ours.
Me either. This is crazy.
Crazy.
How the hell did we get here?
I don't know.
When you get what you want, but not what you need. When you feel so tired, but you can't sleep. Stuck in rivers. Lights will guide.
How the hell did we get here?
I don't know.
Yeah, so that was the clip that inspired, and that was quite a tearjerker. It's like, okay, how did we get here? So it's the two ends of the spectrum, where it's like the first end is like, excited. How did we get here? This is amazing. And then the other end, where life happens to you between these two, and you're like, how did we get here?
I mean, you can see how dark it is, and the difference between the color in their marriage in the first part and the color in their marriage in the second part. The one is very bright, they're excited, they're experiencing new things together, and then in the other one it's dark, and there's pain, there's hurt, and you ask each other, how did we get here? And the question is there because it's not a one-day event. Because if it's a one-day event, you can point out and say it was because of yesterday. But you ask each other that question because it's progressive. It's a journey. It happens over time.
So there's a passage of scripture that says that, catch me the little foxes. Yes, the little foxes that spoil the vine. It's the little things that go unattended that eventually, when they finally add up, you get to the end and you're like, they add up so much that you can no longer stay together. You have those things that are called irreconcilable differences, where you can't even name the one thing that got you to a place where you can no longer see eye to eye. So it's those little foxes. So tonight we're going to talk just a little bit. We won't obviously be able to exhaust all of them from end to finish. But what we want to be able to do is to paint a picture that will enable you to see some of these little foxes in your own lives and some of the things that we haven't even mentioned. But now you can identify that it's those little foxes that, when added up, eventually they'll get us to a point where we have to ask ourselves how we got there.
Yeah. So we're just going to go through some of the things, and as you go through, like my husband said, maybe you can add on some things that you can see within your marriage, or maybe some of the things that we're going to point out to you are already familiar. Maybe it's things that you're already seeing. The point of the discussion is to make sure that we don't take the full journey where you get to the point where you say, how did we get here?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is, how did we get here? So if you look at people that are at that gray place and people that are at that vibrant, colorful place, you'll notice that one of the things that stops midway in this journey of marriage is your love expressions. You stop expressing your love. I mean, I once heard a joke about how a couple went for a counseling session, and the wife said, while they were in this session, they said, my husband never tells me that he loves me. He just never tells me that he loves me, and I don't even know if he loves me anymore. He doesn't show it. And the guy said, you know what? I told you that I loved you the day we married you. If that changes, I'll let you know. So clearly that's a person who no longer feels the love expressions. Can you just imagine the love expressions that you used to show each other, even while you were still boyfriend and girlfriend, before you got married? And just after you got married, sometimes you'd write each other little love notes and place them under the pillow. You put little chocolates here and there. You put little pieces of paper in the lunchbox for your spouse to carry to work and be surprised when they open them up. And, you used to have public display of affection. You walk around loving on each other. I mean, it's so easy to tell a couple that is in the honeymoon phase. Why? Because they're showing that love expression.
Yeah. Funny enough, when we were on our way to our honeymoon, I remember the guy was attending to us, saying to us, "Are you guys on honeymoon?" And I found that interesting. I was like, it's not labeled, it's not written anywhere. How did he tell that we are actually going on our honeymoon? And it's because somehow, I'm sure the way that we were relating showed him that maybe this is new love. This is something that is still fresh. And so the point is to try as much as you can to maintain that freshness in your marriage, because the moment that we allow it to die down and to die completely, we begin to put that distance between us, and so we stop showing affection, we stop cuddling, we stop kissing each other. Maybe when you begin your marriage, you would greet each other by the door, with a kiss. But now, maybe your husband or your spouse walks into the house and you hardly notice. It's like, what's up? Or you're busy flipping channels and you don't even acknowledge that, your spouse has arrived. And so it's those little things, we may feel tired sometimes. We may feel discouraged, or maybe something that my spouse has done has hurt me. And I think, right now he's not deserving of that kiss. He's not deserving of that foot rub or whatever it is. But we need to constantly remind each other that with every decision we are making, we are deciding the destination of our marriage.
Absolutely. You know, and so even things like celebration, some people don't even celebrate each other. I remember in the afternoon we were talking about the lady who says, "Listen, if my spouse doesn't celebrate my birthdays, does that mean that they care, or it's just that they just really don't think it's important to celebrate birthdays?" So it's things like that, things that. Think about the things that you used to do in the beginning. There's a passage of scripture that says that not you return to your first love. It's talking about a church, but I think even in a marriage, it still applies. That sometimes when you get to a point in your marriage where you look back and you know you're definitely not where you used to be in terms of your love expressions, sometimes it's important for you to really be intentional and say, you know what, let's return to our first love. Let's do those things first. The things that we used to do in our early marriages, the things that we used to do when people would look at us and think, you guys are still on your honeymoon phase. What are those things? Let's get back to doing those things. And you know what? It doesn't come naturally sometimes. Sometimes because we've gone so long without doing those things, they've died off and they no longer come naturally to us. Sometimes we have to kickstart ourselves into getting these things done. Why? Because at the end of the day, we don't want those little things when added up to get us to a point where we then ask ourselves, how did we get here?
Funny, I'm just thinking, you know, there was one day I was watching something on TV and this, I actually called him and said, baby, come and see this, because this man, I don't know what had happened, where he had gone, but he came back for some weird reason with such excitement for his wife. So he got there and the wife was busy dusting the shelves. And he got there, he was trying to, you know, be nice, to play nice with his wife, you know. And the wife started asking him, he's like, are you okay? What happened? You know, to show that it's now unnatural for them to be in that place. Until this husband gave up, he was like, you know what? Just go back to the dusting of the shelves that you were doing. So sometimes we lose it completely. It becomes a foreign, you know, him holding my hand is like, what are you after? Or getting that text message to say, baby, I love you. It's like, what do you want me to get you? What is it? What have you done? So, you know, get back to that place if you had lost it. You know, sit down and talk about it. What are some of the things that we can bring back in our marriage to keep that fire and to keep that expression of love, you know, that we used to have when we began?
Absolutely. So the next thing I want to talk about is your communication. Sometimes, you know, you know, in our marriages, it's funny though that while we were still dating, we couldn't even get off the phone. You know, we would spend hours and hours and hours on the phone because we just had so much to say. We just had so much to talk about, and our communication was on point. But funny enough, you know, a couple of years later into marriage, you know, it's only those one-word answers. We're no longer communicating as much. So our communication
it's as if we now think there's some transference of information that just happens because I'm sharing the same bed with you. Somehow you're just supposed to know that, you know, I've changed. I no longer want to go after this career, or I've changed. I no longer want to do this. Somehow we think, you know, it's just going to happen automatically. We still have to speak. We still have to communicate.
Yeah, and so you know, for communication, it's the moment you no longer engage with your spouse, you know, there's a numbing that takes place.
Yeah. So, you know, when you don't communicate with your spouse, for example, if you can just say, you know what, it's in my nature to, I'm quiet, I'm a quiet person, I don't talk. So your spouse can be trying to communicate something with you and you don't respond, or the way that you respond is such that your spouse feels they're cut off. They can't keep coming back and trying to, you know, engage you in conversation. What that does is it gets you to a place where your spouse then numbs themselves, because each time they're coming to you and you are shutting the doors or pulling up the walls of and blocking that communication, each time you do that, you're hurting them. So naturally, as a human being, you begin to develop ways of, you know, protecting yourself so that you don't keep getting hurt. So you find that they build up walls to make sure that each time they come to you, they don't get hurt by the responses that you give them. So just because they are no longer coming to you for communication does not mean that they completely no longer want to speak to you. But it's just that they've put up walls, defensive walls, so much so that they're sort of in a shell now. They can no longer relate to you the way that they'd intentionally, in fact, the way that they'd wanted to initially. They've built up walls around them and they can no longer communicate anymore.
So check yourself. Are you that kind of a person who just gives off one-word answers every time that, you know, you're talking to your spouse? Are you that kind of person who just gives headlines and no longer go into detail of what happened during the day, or even when you're describing certain things? Are you that kind of a person who you no longer have that common ground where you just laugh together when it comes to conversations anymore. So if you're at that point, that's the point where you really need to check yourself and say, okay, fine, I think let's really start trying this communication thing once more. Let's get back to that point where we used to not be able to put the phone down because we just had so much to talk about. Let's rediscover ourselves so that we have a lot more to talk about. A couple of weeks ago, on one of our Facebook Lives, we had a topic on having meaningful and engaging conversations. You might want to even go back and take a look at that, where maybe it's at a point now in your relationship where we're like, what do we talk about?
What do we talk about?
What do we talk about? So, you will want to go back to that one where we spoke about having meaningful and deep conversations with your spouse.
So another thing that may be affecting your relationship as well is the fact that you probably no longer appreciate the little things that are being done in your marriage. For example, I remember speaking to a lady who was saying, you know what, I gave up trying to cook, giving my best when I'm cooking, because whether I cook my heart out or I just make sure that there's cooked food on the table, this guy does not appreciate at all. He doesn't acknowledge my efforts at all. It doesn't hurt to say, you know what, thank you so much for the food you prepared today. Oh, you prepared my favorite dish. Wow, thank you so much. It doesn't hurt. The more that you appreciate, the more someone gets excited to think, oh, okay, so what next can I do today? What more can I do to bring out that excitement? What more can I do to bring that smile back on this guy or this lady's face? So the more that you appreciate, the more that you drive your spouse to do more for you.
And you know what, I once read somewhere where it said that, I think it was in one of Ed Louis Cole's books, said what you don't appreciate depreciates. So he said that it's just a fact of life. Whatever doesn't appreciate depreciates. So are you appreciating your spouse? I mean, even in the way that she dresses, your wife, for example, the way that she dresses, do you appreciate or do you give compliments? Slight compliments. Do you know that there's some marriages now where the wife, if whenever they're dressing up in the morning, they know they're definitely not going to get any compliments from the husband. But they're now dressing for the guys at work, because the guys at work are the ones that notice that she's dressed in a colorful way. The guys at work are the ones that notice that her eyeshadow today is different. The guys at work are the ones that notice that she's got new nails and new nail polish and the new nail colors. The guys at work are the ones that notice that she's just had a manicure or a pedicure done. And so now whenever she's dressing, she's thinking, how am I going to, is Mike and Joe from the office, what are they going to say today? They're pretty much dressing for Mike and Joe at the office, and they're no longer dressed for you because you no longer pay attention to them.
And it's not because this woman wants to be naughty or anything like that, but as a human being, you want to be appreciated. You want to be given those compliments.
You gravitate to where you are appreciated.
Exactly, to where you're celebrated. So it's not that they want to be naughty. It's not that they are planning to do anything funny, but it's just human nature. You want to be celebrated. You want to be acknowledged. So if that compliment, I remember one lady saying, you know what, I hadn't worn something short, and it wasn't, ridiculously short, but it was just above the knee. And she says, I hadn't worn something short in a while. So one day I wore something short, and when I got to work, this guy says, hey, you got nice legs. And, she, at that moment, she began to look at herself and think, really? Oh, yeah, but I actually do have nice legs. So now something has been planted in you. The next time you wear something else, you're wondering, what other compliment am I going to get from this person? Now, imagine if the first compliment had come from the husband. Whatever this guy was going to say, it really wouldn't have mattered at all, because the most important person to me has already said that to me. Absolutely. So it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And we were talking about the wives, but even for the husbands, it also applies. Some of the things that I do in the home, whether it's in terms of providing, or whether in terms of just being a handyman in the home, fixing the taps or fixing the plugs, small things like that. Even the effort that I put to make sure that my when you do those press-ups just before you take a bath,
I just need to acknowledge that, I see something is happening.
Thank you.
I see it.
So you have to compliment. You've got to throw in the compliments. You've got to appreciate those little things. It's the little things. It's never the big things. It's great to appreciate the big things. That, oh, thank you so much, you bought me a car. It's great to appreciate, oh, thank you so much, we have gone on holiday. But it's the every single day things that when they add up, they'll eventually outweigh the big compliments, because it's the little things that spoil the vibe if they're not done correctly.
So that's the next one.
Meeting each other's needs.
Hey, that's your favorite one.
Wow, the least bit. So meeting each other's needs. So if you look back, from where you came from to where you are now, how much of each other's needs are you meeting, and how much of each other's needs have you dropped along the way? Because certainly that is a very big thing. It's a big deal when it comes to getting you to a point where you ask yourselves, how did we get here? It's when needs are no longer being met, whether they are needs for the communication that we spoke about, whether it's needs for appreciation, just whatever kind of needs that your spouse has. And when you begin to drop those needs, or when you begin to belittle those needs, or you begin to ridicule those needs, you know what? Your spouse shuts down, and they may no longer even present those needs to you. But the fact is, just because they're no longer presenting those needs to you does not make those needs go away.
Yeah.
It just simply means either one of two things. Those needs are going to be suppressed, but they will rear their ugly heads somewhere else. In another thing. Like for instance, you know how there's just always this joke that goes around that, you know what, wives that are not, you know, being satisfied at home sexually are very aggressive, and they're just angry.
The wives of the men.
It's usually the women. They're just angry, and sometimes, you know what, because it's some then needs that are not being appreciated, which are now coming up in another front, which are now coming up on another direction, which sometimes you look at it and you don't even think it's related, but it's simply because those are needs that went unmet, that are, you know what, are now coming out in another way. Or if they don't suppress them and end up with them coming up from another front, they will find another way of meeting them, or somebody else who will meet those needs for them.
Yeah. So if you are, you know, someone that that engages other people in conversations, you'll find that of late I've begun to hear more and more, or in fact read more and more of the ladies who are saying, you know what, now I'm having an adulterous relationship, a relationship outside my marriage, because each time I try and speak to my husband about, you know, my sexual needs, he belittles them, or whether it's his background that, you know, makes him believe that sex is not important to women, or women should not enjoy sex, or whatever the case is. I've tried to bring it forth, but it's unacceptable to him. Or maybe because, you know, the moment that I try to bring it up, he asks the question, where did you learn that? Where did you get that? And you know, in the end, I look like I'm the one that is in the wrong. Yeah. So instead of, you know, nudging and nagging about a specific issue, the woman then just decides, you know what, I can get, you know, somebody just outside who can satisfy that need. There's no emotions involved. It's just a satisfaction of that need, because my husband won't give it to me. So you don't want to create those opportunities in your marriage, because, you know, you're not paying attention to the needs of your spouse.
And so, you know, as husbands, particularly as husbands, I know this usually occurs among husbands, that sometimes we're not teachable, we're not approachable when it comes to things like sex, you know, needs, but particularly when it comes to things like sex. So as a husband, you know what, be approachable and be teachable. I don't know where this thing comes from to say, you know, where did you get that from, or who have you ever done that with? You know what, it's allowed. My wife always has this example that she likes to give out, that just because you've never had lasagna before doesn't mean that you don't know when there's
when you need to add a bit more salt, or a bit of pepper. You know, even if you haven't had a dish before, your taste buds can still tell you that maybe this would have been better if you had added a little bit of that and a little bit of that. And so it's the same thing in our sexual relationships. You know, I don't have to have tried it somewhere for me to say, you know, what about us doing this? It could be just my body screaming, hey, maybe if it's done this way, you know, I could enjoy it better. Or if it's done that way, you know, I could enjoy it better. So let's pay attention to each other. Sometimes, you know, work on those background issues that hinder us from really getting the satisfaction out of our marriages.
Absolutely. So I mean, I would have wanted to go a little bit deeper on the sex bit, but we'll save that conversation for another day. But just know the important thing about is really to meet each other's needs. Get to a point in your marriage where you even ask each other and say, okay, listen, are there any needs that I'm not meeting right now? Are there areas where I could do better when it comes to meeting your needs? Not just to ignore or to belittle or to actually be very upset or to be angry whenever certain needs are brought up. Because at the end of the day, what you want is for you to get to a journey that works, to a journey that is more enjoyable, that is pleasurable, and that is fulfilling as husband and wife.
Yeah, so these needs, please note, it's not just sexual needs. It's any needs of of any kind in the marriage, and these needs could be coming from the husband, they could be coming from the wife. The husband could be saying, I need more respect, or I'm feeling I need more of this, I need more attention, whatever the case may be. Please make sure that you pay attention to the needs that your spouse raises.
So the next thing that we're going to talk about, we're almost done though, but the next thing we're going to talk about is refusing to change. So we're talking about the little things that when added up will eventually get you to a place where you then start asking each other these questions of how did we get here? So refusing to change is a big one. Yeah.
So hey, most people cry out, wives cry out, I've tried to speak to him about this, but he won't change. I've tried to, to bring this up, but, my spouse won't change. I've tried to even engage other people about issues that I feel like need to be addressed in our marriage, but my husband just won't change. So it becomes very difficult when you openly show that you cannot be bothered. Your spouse is telling you, you are angry, you respond in anger, or you're always angry. I get to a point where it's actually scary for me to approach you and tell you certain things because of how you lash out, because of your short temper. I'm actually getting to a point where I'm actually scared of you now, and you choose not to work on that area and you ignore it. Once you do that, what you're doing is you're creating or opening up room for other things to begin to enter into your marriage. Because if I feel that I can't come and talk to somebody because he gets angry, then whenever something happens, I may feel the need to lie about it. For example, if I was to drive out in his car and accidents happen, I get a scratch on the car or something happens, I could be very scared to come and tell him that this is what has happened because I know I'm going to go and lash out. So what do? I could just come up with lies, or pretend, I never even noticed that there was a scratch there. So when you don't address, or refuse to change when your spouse brings up something, you are opening up doors to other things now coming into your marriage. One of those things being lies, because the person feels that they're in a corner, they need to come out of it. And what better way to do it? Not a good way, but what a better way for them to do that, but to start lying and coming up with excuses. And
I've had so many situations now where there's even a team up between a spouse and children, where they say, okay, fine, we're not going to tell him this. We'll tell him this instead. Just simply because there's that, failure or that inability to change an aspect of themselves, which messes up the marriage if they don't. So not only in issues to do with anger, but just think about all the different things that your spouse has been asking you to say, hey, listen, when it comes to this, please could you? When it comes to that, please can you tone this down? When it comes to this, can you try and do that? The reason why they're actually saying it, for the most part, is not to change you, right? But it's really so that you can gel better. Because there are certain hard edges that sometimes we may have, that when it comes to us becoming one flesh, that hard edge that I have may actually be bruising to her. So what we want at the end of the day is for us to gel. What we want at the end of the day is for us to really become one flesh and effective unit. And so if there are any uneven edges that I have that may be bruising or causing discomfort to my spouse, it's on me to be able to shave those things off so that we can gel better and so that we can truly be an effective unit and an effective team that is winning all the time.
So, we would want to get to a point where as couples, let's look at the things that are happening around us. Let's look at the examples that are around us, whether it's the things that you're reading about marriage, the things that are happening, whether you're reading about them in the newspaper, in magazines, whether you're watching on television, whether it's stories that you're hearing in the newspaper about, certain things that are happening in marriages. Let's use those to be learning curves for us in our marriage, to say, okay, so this is what I heard concerning such and such. How do they end up in this place? And if you notice something that could possibly link you into that direction, you work on it and change it as soon as you can, so that you don't find yourself in the same place as the other people that you're watching.
Absolutely. So in other words, use other people's bumps as mileage pegs for you to say, hey, listen, you see what's going on with those guys? Let's look at that as a mileage peg for us to say, how many kilometers or how many miles do we have left until we get to that point? at the current rate that we're going, at the current way that we're living our lives, at the current way we communicate, at the current way that we interact and relate as husband and wife, how many kilometers, how many miles, what is it going to take? How much more distance do we have until we get to that bump there? You know, so reevaluate every single time that you hear of a situation that is going on elsewhere. I think it's a great opportunity for you to reevaluate your own marriage and look at yourselves, you know, especially when things are not going well. When things are going great and, you know, it's fine. But when you are at that point where things are not going, don't wait until you get to that destination for you to reevaluate and then ask yourselves, how did we get here? Use those bumps on the road, which you're seeing from other people, to use those and evaluate yourselves and say, hey, listen, at the rate that we're going, we are likely to get to this bump there soon. So what do we need to do? So use other people's bumps to as pegs for you and your marriage.
Because, you know, in any aspect of life, whether it's in business, in fact, even if you look at business, what people do in their companies or in their organizations is look at the trends of other companies and say, okay, you know, this is what is happening. This is what is happening with the stock. This is what is happening with this and that. And they try to make adjustments so that they don't find themselves in the same hot space that others are finding themselves. So we need to be very wise and watch out and be careful of the things that are happening around us. It's not that we're going around snooping in other people's relationships, but, you know, these stories crop up and pop up anyway in any direction. So these are the things that we need to be watching out for and saying, okay, even when we read books, you know, people are writing so many books on marriage, and people are sharing some of the things that they went through as couples. And those are the things that we should be watching out for and saying, okay, for us, let's take this as a learning curve and say, you know, let's implement this to make sure that we don't get to this destination as well.
100%. I like the example that you're using about business. You know, sometimes I really think that if we really take our marriages as we take business, we would have a lot less issues, you know, as husbands and wives. I mean, think about it. You know, that marriages in business, we're talking customer is king. Imagine if you make your customer, your top customer, king. You know, customer is king. Customer is never wrong. You're talking, you know, product improvement, constant product improvement. You're improving your product. You're improving who you are to your customer. You're improving who you are to your spouse. You know, you're talking about, you know, just strategies on how to really please your customer, strategies on how to develop yourself, strategies on how to evolve, you know, and so continue to become, you know, profitable in the eyes of your spouse. So I think, you know, it's very important for us to always be looking at our marriages in some of those, you know, ways and some of those little, you know, strategies, so that we really take on the necessary things to make our marriages stronger. Because at the end of the day, what we want is, we always want to get to points where we're asking each other, babe, how did we get here in the good things? How did we get here when we're reaching milestones, good positive milestones, good fulfilling positive milestones, where we're asking each other, babe, how did we get here in a good way? Yeah.
So to round off, you know, this is the time for you to be sitting down with your spouse and just checking where are we at as a couple. You know, what are some of the things that we need to be working on right now to make sure that when we get to our destination, we are smiling and saying, how did we get here? And instead of sobbing and crying and in pain and saying, how did we get here? You know, what are some of the things that we need to be changing? What are some of the things that we need to be incorporating? This is a conversation that only you and your spouse can have. Nobody else can do that for you. So take this time, take this opportunity to have that discussion, you know, and see where it takes you.
Absolutely. So, like we said, it's not an exhaustive list. I mean, there are obviously a whole lot more. So you like I've been saying, take this time also to even figure out some of the little things that are beginning to crop up in your marriage over the last couple of years that you've been married, and talk about those things and see how best you can start removing them, because it's those little things that, when added on and are packaged like this, they'll get you to a point where you start asking yourselves how you got there. So yeah, that's all we had for tonight. I think we're going to be back again here on Friday, right? Friday, we've got another very interesting conversation. You don't want to miss that. We've got guests on Friday, so that is going to be amazing. You don't want to miss that, so you do not want not to log in on Friday. So, Mr. and Mrs., thank you so much for watching again. Please, we will leave this on there, so please continue to share. And so, yeah, it's been good. It's been great. We have to bounce now. So, remember,
keep on loving.
Keep on loving. We'll see you on Friday.